Hello everyone and welcome to Skar Gaming. I've done a few streams, but this is my first YouTube video, so I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to anyone who is viewing this and supporting me. If you do enjoy this video, please do like, share and subscribe, and I hope any future content I do is also enjoyable. So with that in mind, let's get down to business. SINoALICE is a gacha RPG. For anyone who doesn't know what a gacha game is, it's a game where you'll use an in-game currency in order to draw from a pool of weapons or characters or items that will ultimately help you progress and get stronger throughout the game. These currencies can more often than not be bought with real money, allowing some players who are willing to put a larger sum of money into the game a huge advantage over the more free-to-play player. But as a free-to-play player myself, for the most part, I do use the Royal User Service, as do a lot of my guild, which is a monthly subscription that gives us a few perks here and there. But outside of that, we are mostly free-to-play. And as that sort of group, we have managed to viably make our way through the game and hit the S rank within the Coliseum just recently, which we're pretty happy with for our sort of guild type. So it does show that being free to play doesn't necessarily mean you can't get anywhere in the game, though we don't really aspire to be within like sort of the top 50 guilds or anything like that, because our chances just really aren't that great for the type of way we play the game. I'm going to put a disclaimer out that anything I cover in this video it is through mine or my guild's trial and error, and though it has worked for us, that doesn't necessarily mean it is going to work for everyone or that it is the most optimal way to play the game. So with that in mind, let's begin by starting to have a look at some of the more basic elements of the game. So, when you first start playing SINoALICE, you'll be given a chance to draw once from the gacha freely. This gacha differs from any beyond this point, as it will allow you to redraw if you do not like the results you get. I didn't do this when I began playing, as honestly I wasn't paying much attention and I just wanted to sink my teeth into the game. But if you do start the game with an idea of what sort of role you would like to take, it can be very worth re-rolling until you pick up an SR and a few S weapons that fit into that role. Otherwise, feel free to just go for it and see where the game takes you. SINoALICE has a story mode system. You will go into the story and be met with a quick short monologue per story battle you get into. When inside the story, there are two battle options available to you. You can remain on the automatic option, which will play the game for you, but it will attack at a slower rate, or you can play yourself. The auto option isn't really very efficient, and so when it comes to things like the Coliseum, or if you're trying to take on the multiplayer sort of raid type battles in the game, I really wouldn't recommend using it in those situations. But it is great for like sort of when you're farming content and you're just, sat there watching Netflix or something. In battle, you can also use things called nightmares, which are summons that will give you sort of extra effects or buffs. It is worth noting which nightmares you find more useful and summoning those to make getting through battles a lot easier. Now I'm going to be honest, in terms of story for SINoALICE, I find a short story where on an extended part I could get maybe 2 or 3 sentences, and on short parts 1 sentence per fight to really not amount to much. Half of the time I have no idea what's going on, and beyond the overall idea of every character wanting to resurrect their author for X, Y or Z reason, I honestly at this point have no idea what's actually going on in the story, or if things are actually advancing. But that in mind, there are some aspects of the story that I'm sure many will be drawn to. And even if the story doesn't draw you in, I'm sure there are other things that will. So now that we've looked into the story, let's look into powering up aspects of the game. The overall system is fairly simple. First we gather Twilight Crystals. We gather these from a number of methods such as missions or quests or medals or real money. Then we spend these crystals on the gacha, which in return will give us weapons, nightmares and characters. We play missions to gain XP and boost our rank. This allows us to carry more weapons and grants us more health points. Weapons come in several types, such as swords, hammers, spears, bows for the vanguard classes, or tome stave instruments and orbs for the rearguard classes. For Vanguard, these weapons differ by swords and hammers doing physical attacks, while swords will hit a single target and hammers will hit 1 to 2 targets, and spears and bows will do magical attacks, bows hitting a single target and spears hitting 1 or 2 targets. In terms of rear guards, staves will heal, tomes will debuff, instruments will buff allies, and orbs will do damage. I believe orbs will always target 1 or 2 enemies, while staves, instruments and tomes will depend on the particular one you use, some targeting 1, while others will target 1 or 2. Overall, I would personally recommend avoiding orbs as they don't fit well into the PvP aspect of the game, which you will likely as a player eventually want to take part in, which I'll explain as we get there. Weapons will also have an element, red being fire, green being wind, blue being water, and it follows a pretty simple red beats green, beats blue, beats red, or fire beats wind, beats water, beats fire system. Targeting a foe's weakness will bring you a significant amount of damage in the story. Weapons also come with skills. Each has 3 skills based on the game mode it is used in. For story, it will follow the standard story skill whenever you use the weapon. For the Coliseum, which is the PvP aspect, it will use the Coliseum skill, and it will also have a chance of activating a Coliseum support skill for a massive power-up. These skills can all be leveled up by using other weapons or skill gems that you'll be able to obtain to make them more powerful. So now that we've looked at weapons, we can look into characters. There are several classes in the game, each having a power-up from their specialty weapon, such as sorcerers with tomes or the crusher with the hammer. You should keep this in mind while trying to decide the best type of weapon for you and use when it comes to deciding your playstyle. The losses of equipping other weapons are not so bad that you should avoid them though. Filling more weapons into your grid will increase your stats and make you stronger. Characters once at max level can be limit broken, but this does require a character arcana, which can be got through medals, or certain event characters could have them appear in the events. There might be other methods that I'm not too sure about. There is also one other type of subclass available. There's only been one so far as the moment I bring out this video, which is called the Nightmare characters. Shout out to Zetsu and my guild for allowing me to get this footage of his Nightmare Paladin Alice. In this case, there is a huge debuff in place for any weapon type that isn't their usual weapon type. So for the Paladin, it is usually the Spear. The Spear will receive a large buff, while any other weapon type will receive a large debuff. For this type of character, you definitely want to focus on filling it with the favoured weapon type, as Zetsu has done here. Right, let's look at the Nightmares now. Nightmares are your summons in fights. You'll only be able to use summon 1 Nightmare per fight, and if someone uses 1 Nightmare skill, it will lock other Nightmares with the similar skills out from being used, such as if I summoned the Eris summon, which uses the skill Fairy King Magic 2, no others would be able to use Eris, or say Simone, who uses Fairy King Magic 1. Looking into what summon best fits you or your guild in the Coliseum and placing at the right time can really change a battle, so do be sure to look into all of your summon skills. And it is worth noting that unlike weapons, as far as I've seen, all the summons that I've seen evolved have had their summon skill get stronger alongside it. Armor you'll be able to power up similarly to weapons, same for the armor skills, same for the they will also offer certain buffs if you do have a full set equipped for certain fights, such as the Near Automata armor set offered a buff for fighting Near Automata featured enemies. The stats on the armor are not really to be overlooked as well, though I would personally recommend starting your focus on the weapons and waiting until you get some armor types that can be evolved into SR before beginning to power those up. Now, when we look at weapons, each has a cost to equip it onto our grid. This will go against the total cost you can equip, which increases with your rank. Ranking up is of course good, as higher cost equates to more and stronger weapons, which then equates to more power. This goes hand in hand with grid building, which for the early game you'll likely just want to let it auto build based on the points. Though it is worth noting that it does not always pick the strongest point weapons you have to offer. I'm not 100% sure on why, but we did have an issue with Zetsu being able to create a higher point grid than what his auto was recommending. But from there you can move on to your subgrid and auto there as well. Do remember whenever you're changing your grids to remove your subgrid, because perhaps something in your subgrid will remove to your main grid once you go through the audit process again. That said, eventually you will probably start looking into sort of building your grid yourself, focused around themed weapons, etc., that are better for your class. But that is something you can do sort of as you gain the weapons and such to be able to do this comfortably. So now we can click on the upgrade and sell menu and look into upgrading our weapons. Here you can put in any fodder we aren't going to use, or any XP weapons or any skill gems to power up weapons until they hit the level cap. It will cost in-game gold, but this is fairly easy to come by with an event focus on it popping up a couple of times a week. If you do have the Royal User Service, you can use a ticket you get as well to double the gold amount received from that event for 10 minutes per use, which is pretty helpful. Once we hit the cap for the weapon, there are a couple of things we can do. First, we can evolve our weapon, bringing, say, an S into an SR or an SR into an L. You'll sometimes find some weapons can even be evolved multiple times, taking an A to an SR, for example. And it is worth checking for this, as when you evolve a weapon from A to SR, overall the stats won't be as good as a natural SR, but the cost to equip will also remain the same as an A, allowing for, while cost could be a bit of an issue for you, equipping more SRs onto your grid. Evolving weapons will be one of the main accessible ways of powering up through the game, and you'll be doing it a lot. Thankfully, there are events that will help grant the materials to evolve you these weapons, and they appear a few times a week as well. We can also look into limit breaking our weapons. This will increase the level cap by 5 for an S into an SR or 10 for an SR into an L. This allows for more stats, which is always good. It is worth noting that evolving an SR into an L that you have limit break, or for any weapon for that matter, you only need to reach the original max level to do this. You don't need to hit the new max level. Evolving also applies to Armor and Nightmare. They all have their own material types, with the Armor requirements appearing in sort of events, and also the event that pops up a few times a week. Nightmares, on the other hand, are a bit more difficult, and the only methods I've noticed so far have been through the Char Medal currency, which you gain from the Coliseum, or selling, or limit breaking, or using gacha weapons as fodder. These all provide Char Medals. And then there has been one other method with a new sort of guild gacha thing that came with the Coliseum, but that's not really a consistent way of getting them. You can progress and save these up and then limit break nightmares, but it will be a lot slower just in general for limit breaking or leveling nightmares, because the resources to do so are just obtained a bit slower than the others. So with all this, how do we quickly level up weapons or armor? There are actually guerrilla events that appear several times a day for half an hour, which you'll be able to find easily by giving it a quick Google. There is 2 available that both offer XP items, one for weapons, one for armors. Do take advantage of these and try to level up your weapons evenly as you do so, I would recommend. The difference in increase in stats per level isn't much compared to the increase of overall XP cost per level. So leveling them all together will lead your points to growing more quickly at first, and ultimately it will take the same length of time to hit the max level. There is a downside to this, as it will cost more gold, because as your weapons level up, they cost more gold to level up, while if you just go from say 1 to 40, it will just count as level 1 gold throughout the entire thing. But as the gold is a fairly easy resource to come by, I would recommend just leveling up evenly, and I honestly don't see it being much of a problem. There are other types of events that appear in the game, the ones that happen every few days, for example, being the ones that offer extra gold or armor or weapon evolution materials. I've mentioned those previously. And then there are also some limited time events, such as an end to Summer Dreams, as of creating this video. These events can offer either a different drop every time you clear a level until you've gained all of them, or in the case of this event, it can drop a type of medal, such as clan medals here. So I have mentioned medals a lot in this video. I'm sure at some point some of you are asking what the hell these medals actually are. So this is our list of medals. We have Char Medals here, which are medals we gain from the gacha items and the Coliseum. We can trade these for all sorts, such as useful SR weapons, a nightmare. I haven't particularly found much interest in it myself, but it could be good, I don't know. Character classes and arcanas also. Most notably for me is the Nightmare Evolution materials, and then there are some other things too. We have Friendship Medals, which we gain by playing with friends. Yay! As a Royal user, I'm limited to 5 per day. I'm not sure what the limit is if you do not use the Royal service, but I'd imagine it's probably 3. These can be saved and used for some other character arcanas, or you can gain 5 Twilight Crystals daily from them. You can get some skill level up gems, and some S weapons, and some other powerful stuff. Medals of Desire come from participating in the gacha. They can be saved and used to buy characters or weapons from the gacha when you've reached a certain amount, or used to buy arcanas for the characters that you gain from said gachas. Medals of Desire do last a few gachas usually, but they will eventually fall off in place of a new type of Medal of Desire, so it is worth using them before that happens. Grand Medals come from the Grand Coliseum event, a big PvP off that can result in some nifty weapons and classes. This is the only method that has had a Nightmare class so far in the game, and it has offered some seriously powerful weapons too. Claire Medals come from the event available at the moment. They can be used for some generic power-up stuff, some event items such as Nightmares or weapons, and are a great method to gain bird masks or dragon shackles for SR to L upgrades of weapons or armor. Royal Medals, another perk of being a Royal user, you gain 1 per week of using the service. You do gain all 4 weeks worth of medals at the same time if you buy the monthly service from the moment you pay. So with all this, I'm just going to touch on sort of the method I used to level up quite quickly. I did it a while back, and I actually did an alternate account and got myself from sort of just starting the game to 56,000 points within my first 12 hours of playing. I did play quite a lot over those hours, but putting in the work at the start does make it a lot easier to play casually and remain sort of equally around that level later on. To do this, I followed a pretty simple method. I just found the strongest story quest I could do, and I repeated it on auto to rank up quickly while I was watching some Netflix or anime. If you have the Royal User Service, you can use your double XP tickets here, though I didn't have the service on my alternate account at all. Once you stop ranking up before you run out of AP, you'll go to your weapons and realise your cost will have grown up a lot, and now you can equip as many weapons as possible. And then we go to the Gorilla Weapon event when it pops up and start to power up all these lovely new weapons, and it'll give us a huge power up, allowing us to move forward in the story to a new fight that we can just leave on auto that offers good XP. And then we just sort of repeat this method, and we can very quickly get the cost to fill a grid with weapons. Yeah. Okay, so now we're feeling pretty powerful. We've probably joined a guild by this part. First things first, when it comes to Coliseum, are you within their top 5 strongest Vanguard classes? If not, chances are you are going to be put on the back line where 90% of your damage is going to fall off. Bear in mind, it might be worth considering moving to a guild where you can be within their top 5 if you want to play a Vanguard, or maybe creating your own, or trying out a support class. I would recommend all of these, as ultimately as a Vanguard in the backline you're not going to really be contributing much. So when you create a guild, you'll gain access to several settings, such as the types of players you're after, the amount of points you want them to have, whether you want the game to automatically approve new players and accept them on your behalf, or whether you'd rather accept them yourself. Bear in mind, if you do use the auto approve as a new guild, if you do not use the auto approve as a new guild, it might take some time before people start really requesting to join. You can edit your submasters, etc. here as well. Under preferences, you can edit your information, whether you are willing to play certain classes, etc. People trying to scout you. You can also allow switching, which allows people to swap places with you from the front and back line mid-battle in the Coliseum. I'm sure this can work out great if you have extra Vanguard who is getting debuffed to hell. You can swap between each other, but it's not something I've personally used. Whether the rear guard is preferred, this is because the game will automatically place the top 5 strongest into the Vanguard. which you can swap mid-fight if the switching is allowed, but it's just easier to confirm the rearguard preferred option, and this will just place you automatically into the rearguard when the fight begins. It is worth noting that if there is not 5 people that do not have rearguard preferred selected, then it will just again place you in the front line from the start, because it will always want 5 and it's not found enough people to choose from. Again, beginning from the strongest down. The guild notice board is an area where you can write various information. We use it to note nightmare placements in the ideal fight without any downtime, which doesn't really exist, but it gives a rough idea, and that's just sort of what we do. So next we're going to look at the demon summons. 2 will appear throughout the fight, usually around the sort of 16 to 17 minute mark, and the second around the 6 to 7 minute mark. That's remaining. If possible, it is well worth adjusting as much as viably possible to claim at least 1 demon. Personally, we aim to use our most powerful nightmares, which are Fast Lindworm and Ice Golem, alongside the demon summon time, if possible, to sort of apply heavy pressure to the enemy team, or we attempt to claim the demon for ourselves. These summons, to claim them, you'll need to use a certain amount of weapons types that you use a certain amount of times, and the first to reach the number required will summon the demon, damage the enemy, and place an extremely powerful buff on the party that summoned it. For the duration, or until you kill the enemy vanguard, pushing it into skirmish time, that buff will give you a really big power up. Right, so firstly, when it comes to the Coliseum, I am going to say that, as I mentioned earlier, I do think that orb users, such as the mage class, are bad. This is because when you're in the rear guard, as I mentioned, you only do 90% of the damage you would do, and then if you're in the vanguard, the front line, then you're going to want a full orb setup, because if you use like sort of your buffs or your heals, that's just stuff people on the back line could be doing, and you're sort of wasting the possibility of what could be happening in the front line. And even if you do manage to have a setup of 20 orbs, there is no demon that has orbs as a contributor towards summoning it, meaning the largest buff in the fight is something you as a player would not contribute to at all, ever. That said, they are perfectly good to use in the story mode. From there in the Coliseum though, it is good to have a variety of classes: clerics to heal, minstrels to buff, and sorcerers to debuff. I will note that when you defeat the enemy's vanguard and press into the skirmish time, all of the enemy debuffs will fall off. Thus, as a sorcerer, I would usually say it's best to focus on using your debuffs to remove enemy buffs as much as possible, rather than just debuff nuking them into oblivion. In terms of vanguard, I found so far a mixture of everything is working out fine, though that said, I think that might be due to the game being fairly new and people still finding their niches, with particular focus on weapon types and elements really taking over later. I think that's what's going to happen, so I would definitely try to sort of prepare for that. So there's my final thoughts on how to, as a mostly free-to-play guild outside of the Royal User Service, be able to play fairly casually and also be capable of like sort of reaching the upper tiers of the strength in the Coliseum. Honestly, I would say that you'd need to sort of sit down for the first week and grind quite a bit, just doing what I said earlier and going through the story to increase the rank, to increase your costs so that you can increase more weapons, so that then you can boost those weapons with the guerrilla events and level them, and repeat that method for a little while. Aim to fill your grid with sort of SR to S weapons, and then evolve them all into L and SR weapons. And then once you've reached this point, you'll already be fairly powerful, and you'll be able to keep up mostly by casually doing sort of event quests and just sort of working through your AP and then purifying, which a Royal User player can also do every 4 hours as to 8 hours. Every now and then, just sort of like, you know, leaving the game on auto mode and just hopping into new events and doing some new grimoires if they have like weapons that interest you. Maintaining a somewhat competitive level of decency as a free-to-play player is always going to take some level of work, but it makes it fairly easy to do, and don't be ashamed of falling behind the top end of like sort of the whale players who put a lot of money into it, because at the end of the day there is also the point that any whale player who doesn't put in work and just puts in money is also going to sort of, if you do put in work, fall behind you. And it's always going to be nice if you do come into a team where they sort of like, they have all these paid summons and paid characters and you manage to beat them just off your own hard work. That's always a good feeling. As I say, this does only count for that. If you do have those types of players who are putting a similar level of work, then ultimately it is not really going to be a thing that will happen. But all that in mind, that's it really. So thanks again for watching. I do hope that most people who watch this video at least found something that you could take from it and found it enjoyable to watch. If you have any other great methods of advancing through the game, please do comment, or if there's anything that you think would work out better, or just any improvements to the video in general. If you did enjoy this video and would like to see more content going forward, which at the moment I'm considering a wide range of subjects, which will sort of see what happens, but this does include other gacha games or perhaps some anime related stuff. Please do like, share and subscribe and show your support, and once again thank you very much for watching.